Subaru has finally done a hybrid version of the Forester here for the 2025 model year, the first ever Forester Hybrid. And in this video, I'll cover the exterior, the interior, take it for a drive and see what it's like out on the road, as well as talking about the better fuel economy you can expect here in the hybrid version, as well as talking about the pricing and how it compares to the competition. And so, as far as the hybrid version of the Forester, well, it's available on everything except the base trim. So these start with the premium trim, so a slight bit of a higher entry point here, but premium's really the main trim that a lot of people go for anyway. And it gives you a new engine, a new hybrid system with much better fuel efficiency, up to 35 mpg combined. And you also still have no compromises. You still have the same ground clearance here, which is 8.7 inches of ground clearance, by the way. Still, you know, one of the best ones in its segment here, and still gives you the same looks. The only changes here on the outside are the fact that you have a hybrid badge here on the door and another one there on the back, but the bumpers are the same. There is no attempt to visually differentiate this vehicle from its non-hybrid versions here. And as far as Forester styling in general, I still think it's kind of generic personally, but obviously styling is subjective. But I do appreciate this limited trim that we have here. Doesn't have the bronze brownish kind of wheels and trim accents that you got on the sport trim, which is a little more polarizing, I'd say. This is a little more normal, and this River Rock gray color is actually a really nice color and fits along with this trend we're seeing with other car companies of doing, you know, this grayish kind of cement color. So that's good at least, but there are a couple different changes to the interior, so let's check that out. So the interior of the 2025 Forester Hybrid is, again, mostly the same as the regular Forester. And if you watched my review on the 2025 Forester already, you'll know basically everything you need to know. But the main little highlights of the changes here are that you now get a 12.3-inch digital gauge cluster that is currently exclusive to the hybrid version. I'm assuming it will trickle down to at least the higher versions of the regular Forester eventually, but for now it's exclusive to the hybrid. And it's a really nice gauge cluster. So it does look a lot like their regular analog gauges there in that main view. And you do have that little customizable portion on the left there, but then you also have two other views. You have one which eventually, this whole system is still very slow, but eventually loads Apple Maps or whatever your default map app is on your phone. It'll put that in the gauge cluster, which is really cool to see. A lot of others will do like their, you know, onboard nav in the gauge cluster, but to have your actual smartphone app, you know, navigation in there is really nice. You also have another one that focuses on the driver assistance tech if you'd like that, or just something a little simpler there. But really nicely done gauges. I also like the way they display the hybrid info. You know, there's no battery gauge because it's not really important for a hybrid. And you otherwise, you know, just have a little charge meter there in replacement of your tach. And I think it's actually really well done. Really nice and high resolution, nice crisp graphics. There's also a little EV drive mode button here on the left-hand side. That's for, again, very low speed, like crawling through a parking lot kind of stuff. There is no actual, you know, higher speed electric driving in this. It's not a plug-in hybrid, just a regular hybrid. But, you know, at least you have that for, again, crawling around a parking lot or something. And then the other two little changes, one is just that the back seat now has a little vent there. That's something that you always need here with these Toyota-based hybrid systems, which this does have some Toyota tech as far as the hybridization goes, and so that's why you see that vent there. And then the other thing that some people might be upset about is the fact that in exchange for the hybrid components in the battery pack, you have now lost the spare tire in the back. So, and there's really nowhere to put it, so there's no hope of adding one in unless you want to just infringe on your cargo space there. Thankfully, it appears the cargo space is unchanged otherwise, though, at least as far as, you know, the load floor goes. But yeah, just no spare underneath the floor anymore. And otherwise, though, for anyone that's unfamiliar with the 2025 Forester, I'll briefly go over the other highlights here for these in general. So you have nice, soft, comfortable seats. These ones have the perforated StarTex vinyl leatherette kind of stuff. You do get actual leather in the touring trim. This is the Limited, which is one down from the top, and they're just heated still. And then the steering wheel also is you know, still very cluttered. I don't like the way Subaru just has an overabundance of buttons. You know, having buttons here for your drive mode selector, two separate buttons for your following distance for the adaptive cruise when everyone else just uses one button, you know, a source button here on the left hand side. Just too much stuff here. You learn it eventually and get used to it, but not a great design in my opinion still, but does have a good 9-3 grip, little 10 and 2 notches, and little paddles there on the back of the wheel. And then you also have this infotainment system, which again, I've complained about plenty of times, so I won't go too much into it, aside from saying it's just slow. It's slow to connect to Apple CarPlay wirelessly. That takes, you know, I don't know, 15 to 20 seconds, sometimes even a little bit more. And as you can see, this is like the first warm start after it's been sitting for maybe a half an hour, and you see how slow. I mean, I don't have to explain. You can just watch it. This is all, footage that is not sped up or slowed down. That is what you're seeing. Those are the real reaction times for the system. It speaks for itself. It's not great. And, it's just, not the end of the world, but this isn't something you have to compromise on or accept. Every single competitor in this segment has a faster infotainment system than this, and so it's just not acceptable. Thankfully, it looks like with the new Outback, Subaru is getting rid of this system. Hopefully that spreads to the rest of the lineup with a refresh for all these interiors, maybe in a year or two. In the meantime, though, that's what you're stuck with here. I mean, it still does at least have, wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto, and once it is up and running, everything works smoothly enough. But just not ideal by any means. Another thing that's not ideal is this wireless charging pad, which they put zero effort into doing. It's smooth and it has no brackets whatsoever. So I couldn't get my phone to wirelessly charge on here, even without a case. I couldn't get it to charge for more than a few seconds. I mean, going around corners throws it off. Even just standing still, it sometimes doesn't like charging. It's a very small contact patch. And Toyota also has the same crappy wireless charging pads, but basically everyone else does better wireless charging pads these days. Just a horrible design for that as well. I don't know why, again, that hasn't been improved yet. And otherwise though, you have your two cup holders, you have a pocket in the door, a nice soft center armrest, which has, a nice cubby in there. And you also do have some interesting trim here on the passenger side of the dash here. And you also do, in all the hybrid versions, get the panoramic moonroof here as standard, which isn't the case in the regular Forester. So it's nice we get that in all, even the lowest version of the Forester Hybrid here. And it's really nice. It's not as large as the panoramic roofs that many other competitors offer, but it is, still a nice large moonroof, bigger than average for sure. You also here on the Limited have the Harman Kardon stereo, which is 11 speakers, about 576 watts, I believe. And it's actually a really good sounding stereo. Again, I don't think it's the best in the segment. There's some other competitors that offer Bose stereos that are really good. But, I'd say this isn't the worst in the segment either. And so, a nice upgrade here if you do appreciate music. And then otherwise, same back seat space. I'm 5'9". I still have a couple inches of legroom to spare sitting behind myself. And they have their own air vents and power outlets back there. And cargo space, again, is unchanged and, still very good. This is, one of the more airy feeling vehicles because of the large glass and everything. It does feel a little more spacious than some of the competitors. And, I think it did a pretty good job as far as the packaging and interior space here on this vehicle, even if, the execution of some of the other things aren't ideal. But let's start up and go for a drive. The Forester here still uses Subaru's regular key, no changes there, but it's a nice key, no complaints there. And of course, it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start in all hybrid Foresters. So just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it turns right on. But unlike other Subarus, when you have battery power, you don't get an engine startup immediately. It just does the electric thing until it decides that it needs the gas engine. All right, so setting off here in the Forester Hybrid. So the first thing you notice about this vehicle, I think the first thing that I notice, of course, is always the great visibility you always have in Foresters. Again, nice and airy, very tall windows, nice thin A-pillars, great view out of the sides and back. Hands down, I think this probably takes the cake, is one of the best, if not the best, as far as visibility in this segment. But the real key difference, obviously, especially if you're someone who's coming out of other Subarus and isn't familiar with hybrids, is just how quiet it is and the fact that you have electrification here, which means the gas engine comes on and off at will, and the whole thing is actually a lot quieter than a regular Forester too, because they added more sound deadening, they say. And so the addition of that, plus the fact that a lot of times the engine's just not on at all, means that it's nice and quiet here. And it's even, I think, like the road noise and wind noise though is quieter too. It's not just quieter engine, but this definitely feels more polished, and it's just really well done, I have to say. And a lot of others with their hybrid systems can feel still really clackety and loud and stuff, and this, I'd say, is even more refined than like RAV4. Honestly, I'd argue even quieter than potentially Mazda CX-50 hybrid. It's really well done, so I have to give them top marks here as far as the refinement here in this. They've also done an excellent job here with the brakes. Regenerative braking can be a little tricky in some other hybrids. The Ford Escape is the worst offender of having a little bit of an iffy brake pedal, but this is perfectly blending the regeneration of refilling the battery with the regular friction suspension brakes to, you know, give you a consistent pedal feel here, and you never have to be doing a guessing game as far as how much braking you're going to be getting out of this thing, and that is very, very nice. And also, you know, you do a little bit of a more responsive powertrain here because of the electrification. You have that little jolt of electric power here, which, you know, makes this feel a little more responsive off the line. Throttle response is pretty good, but it is still this typical slushy CVT kind of thing, because we still do have a CVT transmission here in these hybrids. It's more of it's a planetary gear set. It's not pulleys and, you know, chains and stuff like it used to be. So it's different than the usual Subaru CVT, but it still does give you this kind of, you know, mushy feel. There aren't any shift points. There's no, you know, traditional feeling to this vehicle. You know, it's fine. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people every year, you know, buy RAV4 hybrids with this same kind of feel, and it's completely fine for all of them. Not a deal breaker, just again, a little bit of a difference if you're coming out of a regular transmission or even a, you know, other Subaru. But I'm going to go ahead and put it up into the Sport on the SI drive, which basically just gives you slightly heavier steering, quicker throttle, and transmission mapping. But let's turn down onto this back road and see how it accelerates. Here we go. Okay. There you don't really get much of an electric jolt, and it just, you know, basically sits at the red line or whatever until until you get up to the desired speed and you know, let up on it. But this thing's still really slow, and you know, this is not, again, common for this segment. Most other hybrids do give you a large boost in power, and they feel significantly quicker than their non-hybrid counterparts. This, I'd say, feels about as quick as a regular Forester. Now, you do have 14 more horsepower. It's 194 horsepower total now, but that is still less than everything else in this segment, I believe, with everything really doing, you know, over 200 horsepower. And in some cases, like in the Hyundai and the Kia, you're looking at, you know, over 230 horsepower. And again, I know no one cares about drag racing in this segment, but you know, I especially found the lack of power annoying on the highway, because passing power, I mean, you really have to like bury your foot into the floor and keep it there for a while to, you know, get a pass done sometimes. Obviously, it comes down to what speed you're traveling at and stuff, but not a lot of grunt here. I think, you know, the estimates are around an 8-something second 0 to 60 time here. And again, like the Hyundai and the Kia do something in the 6-second range. Even RAV4, you know, doesn't have that much more horsepower, but those are, I think, like 217 horsepower or something. And even those will do, like, you know, a 7-something second 0 to 60. So this is, I would say, guaranteed to be the slowest one out of all of the hybrid competitors here. You know, your mileage will vary as far as that goes and how much that bothers you. But for me, you know, it was, again, a little underwhelming. I complained about the regular 2025 Forester being a little underwhelming as well. And this, again, in the powertrain department still is just a little underwhelming. But, I mean, at least it's an improvement in power. The unfortunate thing, though, is we've gained about 300 pounds due to the hybrid system. So the power-to-weight ratio is actually pretty close to the same as the non-hybrid one. So again, there's really no benefit power-wise, which is just a little bit of a shame. But coming up some corners here, let's see how that extra 300 pounds feels going around corners. Curb weight, by the way, is right around 3,911 pounds according to Subaru. And, you know, it certainly does have some lean to it. To me, I'd have to drive them back to back, but it feels pretty similar to, you know, regular Forester, so I don't, you know, feel any downgrades as far as handling or anything like that. You do have nice light steering, which isn't the sportiest, but I think for, you know, family crossover like this is appropriate and honestly the better way to set things up. So I actually really like that. And, you know, I mean, it handles everything just fine, and I think Subaru really focused on ride comfort more than some of the others, because I think, you know, this does feel a little softer, and while it might feel a little softer out here if you're in a hurry on a back road, you know, that pays off hugely for the, you know, 90% of the other driving you're doing where you're just cruising along, hitting potholes and doing, you know, less vigorous driving, where, you know, this is going to have one of the smoothest rides. And I think that's the one thing, in addition to the quietness, is just the smoothness of the ride that I was impressed with all week. And it is, I'd say, better than most of the others. And, You know, I think if you test drive a Forester versus some of the others, I can understand why some people do choose the Forester, because it does feel just a little more relaxed, just not trying to be super sporty like many of the others out there. Now, one other thing to mention here is towing here for the hybrid version is sitting at 1,500 pounds, so no improvements as far as that capacity goes either. But one nice thing about the Subaru hybrid approach here is that they have retained a mechanical all-wheel drive system, and so all the hybridization that you're experiencing with, there's two little electric motors in the same transmission housing with that, you know, whole CVT transmission, and those motors combine to, you know, stop and start the vehicle. It keeps everything, all the auxiliaries running, as well as, again, actually providing some power as well. But all that, you know, stops at the transmission, and then from the transmission beyond, it is the same as any other Forester as far as, you know, having a drive shaft, driving the rear wheels to a rear diff. You know, that is all still the same. And so this does mean that in addition to having, you know, the really good ground clearance, if you do trek through some serious snow where the all-wheel drive system that is in the RAV4 and now the CX-50 hybrid as well, you know, if you're worried that that's not going to cut it for you, this is going to be really nice to have. Now, I have to say, in average driving, I live in Pittsburgh here, and in average driving, the all-wheel drive system is completely fine. It's, you know, it's not going to be this real issue like many people paint it out to be. You know, Toyota has ensured that the battery has always got enough juice to power that rear motor indefinitely. So you always have all-wheel drive in those all-wheel drive systems. It's just not a super strong amount of power versus this sending, you know, I believe up to 50% of the power to the rear. So you do have more power that's able to go to the rear here in this. But if you don't find yourself in situations where you need to have all that, you know, that's really only an advantage here of this. And because Subaru took this approach, you do pay a price with fuel economy, with this being actually right at the bottom. It's not the only one that does 35 mpg, but 35 mpg for a hybrid is on the low side for this segment. Everyone else basically does slightly better, and some significantly better into the 40s. So, you know, that's just the trade-off. I think Subaru knows their buyers. They know their buyers probably really value that mechanical all-wheel drive system, and some of them do very much live in very snowy places or do some really impressive adventuring where they need to have that extra capability. And it certainly is on brand for Subaru, but it's just, you know, one compromise you have to, you know, pay attention to. And another thing is that, you know, of course, the Subaru way is all-wheel drive as standard, and that is another thing that, you know, many of the other competitors will even offer better fuel economy with front-wheel drive versions of their vehicles. And you know, if you live in a place that doesn't get a bunch of you know, snow or bad weather all the time, you know, going for one of those front-wheel drive versions maximizes your fuel economy even more. Also is a cost savings in many of those competitors, and is, you know, a nice option to have. I'm not expecting Subaru to offer a front-wheel drive version, but it's just, you know, worth noting again that if that's something that you're not absolutely needing, you might be better off with one of the competitors. This all-wheel drive system also still does have the Subaru X mode, which gives you the snow and the dirt, the normal, and then the deep snow and mud mode. And so again, all the same capability as a regular Subaru, and I think that's really important. And now out on the highway here in the Forester Hybrid, one nice thing also is that you get a little bit more standard equipment here in the hybrid version, including all the safety tech is standard. In a regular Forester Premium, you got to pay an extra $1,000-some for blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert. This has that as standard. You also get all the other Subaru eyesight stuff as standard, which includes adaptive cruise control with the lane keep assist, and the whole system, you know, is really nice to have. But I actually did do, I'd say, roughly 200 to 250 miles on the highway in this week, and I don't love the Subaru Adaptive Cruise Control system. It used to be better, and for some reason in this, it doesn't hold lanes as well as it used to. And I don't know if it's, again, just this one or something. I had better experiences in other Subarus in the past, but now it's, I mean, we're going around this gentle corner here now, and I'm kind of just, you know, letting it do the steering here for me, and it's doing an okay job here at the current moment. But on some tighter corners that I was on earlier this week, I mean, it just couldn't do it, and it was just struggling a lot, and actually at some points even disengaging and being like, you gotta do this because we're not even gonna try. So it's okay. Now also, it's not great with detecting when my hands are on the steering wheel, because there's been many times where, like, my hand is resting here on the bottom rung of the wheel here, and it just sometimes doesn't get enough torque, even though sometimes I'll be actually applying torque to the wheel and it still is dinging at me and being like, put your hands on the wheel, and I'm like, they are, but I didn't wiggle it enough. And so, you know, most others, you know, sometimes you got to wiggle them a little bit, but at least a little wiggle's enough. This, it's like I got to do a lot of actual steering for it to be like, oh, okay, his hands are on the wheel. Just again, not the best sensor there as far as that goes. Maybe the touring version will be better. The touring version does give you a driver monitoring system, and maybe that'll do a better job of deciphering, you know, what you're actually doing here. I'm not sure, but as it is, this one is not great. And yeah, that driver monitoring thing is still one of the safety features you do have to, you know, pay extra for in that touring trim. And also the touring trim is the only way to get the 360 camera. That is something, and again, is available on lower trims of some of the competitors, but that is usually typically a higher trim feature. And so just worth noting, this limited version still does not even have a 360 camera, which is nice, you know, for parking in tight spaces and things like that. But again, with the great visibility here and all that, and all the other stuff, all the other safety technology and everything you have, you know, it's still going to be totally fine. But yeah, everything else is standard. So that means automatic emergency braking, you know, again, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alerts, automatic rear braking, all those types of things are all standard here, and you know, very well done. And I do have to say that outside of the highway complaints, around town, most of the time it did do a really good job of not nagging me. Subaru systems in the past have been really overcorrective and a real pain in the butt as far as their alerts a lot of the times. And again, this still did it sometimes out on the highway, but for the most part, around town, whenever I'd like, you know, maybe cut the shoulder just a tiny bit, you know, kiss the line while I'm going through a corner, hitting the apex. For those types of situations, it hasn't usually scolded me, which is nice. So it's getting better. I feel like in some ways the Subaru system here, you know, it's less naggy, but in other ways it seems like it's not, you know, still the best out there. But the all-important fuel economy discussion here. So these are rated at 35 mpg in the city, 34 on the highway, and 35 combined. So did I live up to that fuel economy rating? Well, I did put almost 400 miles on this vehicle, which is more than I usually do, so I have a really good amount of driving. I've burned through almost a whole tank of gas here, and they do say that in ideal circumstances, you know, if you're hitting the quoted MPG, you can have 581 miles of range here in the Forester Hybrid. Way more. I think it's over 100 miles of extra range compared to a regular Forester with the same 16.6 gallon fuel tank here. And so, you know, that's really impressive. And so you know, basically 400 miles of driving is telling me I still have another 80 miles to go here. So I'm not quite hitting that. You know, I'm realistically more at like 480, but that's because my fuel economy here, I've been averaging 33.2 mpg. Now, I'd say that, again, a little over half of my driving was on the highway, but according to the EPA estimates, that shouldn't matter because these, you know, don't vary wildly, you know, between the city and the highway. We're talking 1 mpg. Now, many other, you know, competing hybrids do highly favor city driving and around town, kind of low speed stuff where you have more of that engine off kind of a scenario. But this doesn't seem to really, you know, care that much. And 33 is about as far as it got it to budge. 33.4, it sat at that for like 100 miles. It just like would not budge, like 33.4 no matter what. I mean, it has varied a little bit, but that's basically, you know, about as good as I've been able to get here out of this. So, again, the claim of 580 miles of range, maybe if you're doing, you know, constant stop-and-go city kind of stuff or something else that this, you know, powertrain favors a little bit more. But, you know, I mean, 33 is still certainly better than, you know, a regular Forester, but, you know, it's just worth noting that, you know, a regular Forester still could probably get almost 30 on its own. So, you know, it's an improvement. Is it a huge improvement? Not really, again, because of just the way Subaru chose to set this up. And then lastly, let's talk about the pricing and how this compares to the competition. So as far as pricing goes, these start right around $36,415. This one, as tested at the limited here, is just over $41,000, and a touring is going to be just over $43,000 here. And the price premium for this hybrid system is about $1,500. But keep in mind, I'm comparing, you know, again, this is starts at a premium trim with a blind spot monitoring package, and if you configure a regular Forester with all that stuff, you know, you're going to come out to about the same, you know, again, $1,500 difference there. So, you know, $1,500 isn't bad for the, again, extra power, the gauge cluster. You know, I think that that's a reasonable upcharge to pay, and, you know, I think they've priced it well as far as that goes. But whenever we compare it to the competitors, that's where the pricing looks a little less stellar. But if you do want to get the best pricing possible on a Forester or any vehicle for that matter, you're definitely going to want to head over to maranmotoring.com. There you'll click on the new car quotes page, and that'll take take you to a page there where you can select the Forester here, and that'll get you connected to a local dealer and get access to also dealer invoice pricing, so you can get the best price possible on one of these, and the dealer can also, you know, show these to you, allow you to take it for a test drive and see what you think about the 2025 Forester Hybrid. So there's going to be a link in the description as well as one in a pinned comment to take you straight to that site and get you all that information. So I'm going to start with the best value competitors and work my way down, because there's quite a few here, but I'm going to try and cover them pretty briefly. So first, I think the best value is the Sportage Hybrid from Kia. Those start about $4,500 less, and then even a fully loaded version of a 2025 Sportage Hybrid XS Prestige, which has ventilated seats, which has, you know, a bunch of other really nice stuff, a bigger panoramic roof, better tech on the inside, all kinds of improvements, and those are still $4,000 less than this. And you also get better fuel economy and better power, 38 mpg for that one, and also about over 230 horsepower. You know, it's not perfect either. I don't love the handoff in the Sportage of going from hybrid to gas. It's not perfectly smooth, but, you know, again, the savings and all the other perks significantly outweigh, you know, the little quirks of that vehicle. So hands down, that's the best value in this segment by a long shot, and so that's the one to get if you do want to have the best hybrid, you know, crossover value in the segment. Moving on, we have the RAV4 hybrid from Toyota, which actually is a really good value, especially these days. It starts about $2,000 less than this. Now, you do get less stuff. It's a smaller screen. There's no panoramic moonroof. You know, it starts at a lower price point, but also, you know, again, gives you a little bit less there, so could be an even trade. But the real big news with the RAV4 is that it gets 5 mpg better than the Forester, even for the all-wheel drive version. And again, that comes thanks to that all-wheel drive system, which is more efficient and less of a drag on the engine than a mechanical all-wheel drive system here. And so that's why those are able to crack, you know, just barely over 40 mpg for the RAV4 hybrid, and you know, really nicely done. Now, RAV4 is pretty old at this point, and you know, we're going to be seeing a new one here, you know, pretty soon. I believe it actually should be out by the time this video comes out, and so that's you know, going to be a different thing. But as far as, you know, the 2025s go, you know, it does start less, and you know, even whenever you get to a fully loaded version, you come in slightly less, and that fully loaded one will again give you the ventilated seats and some other really nice stuff, an actual panoramic roof, and again, legendary Toyota reliability, especially as far as those hybrid systems go, and also more power, you know, and just a lot of really nice perks there. The Mazda CX-50 hybrid is another new entry here that just came out not too long ago, and those are also very impressively configured with. Even the base version starts $1,500 less than this, gives you leatherette seats versus the cloth you get in a base Forester hybrid. And the Mazda CX-50 again uses those Toyota components, the same engine, same hybrid system and all that, and as a result, that also is going to give you much better fuel economy as well, with that one getting 4 mpg better to be exact. And that again comes thanks to that all-wheel drive system, just like the RAV4, so you still have that compromise there in that version of the CX-50, but again, much better fuel economy if that is something that you're after. And that top trim is really nice. It gives you a head-up display, which you can't get in a Subaru. It also gives you those ventilated seats in that top trim, and those still come out about, again, $1,500 less expensive than the top version of the Forester here. The Hyundai Tucson also starts about $1,500 less, and those got a lot of nice improvements for 2025 as well. And the Tucson gets 3 mpg better, and even its fully loaded version comes in about $500 less than the fully loaded version of this as well. That gives you a 10-year, 100,000 mile powertrain warranty, and also with the Hyundai, like, they have a much better wireless charging pad, really fantastic technology, and you know, just really nicely done in the new Tucson. A really nice improvement for 25 here as well. And again, less money. All of the stuff I'm talking about, they're all nicer and they all cost less, with more power, 236 horsepower, I believe, in that Tucson hybrid again as well. It just, you know, that's why your deal will always vary, but when we're talking about MSRPs, you know, it just makes no sense to go for the Forester over any of the others. And you know, with that Hyundai and the Kia, they do have the mechanical all-wheel drive system, so you don't have that compromise like you get with the Toyota and the Mazda. My favorite competitor in this segment here is going to be the Honda CR-V hybrid. That will get 40 mpg while giving you a really punchy powertrain. In my opinion, it's my favorite powertrain. It's not the most power on paper, but really punchy, strong, you know, motors there, because it really feels like an EV with the gas engine mostly just powering electric electric motors instead of this slushy CVT thing we have here in this, and all the other competitors really. So that CR-V hybrid is so good. It handles the best in my opinion. Some of the nicest materials. Now you do have a smaller screen, but you have fantastic amounts of space, and you just have a really nice package there with the CR-V. Now that does start about $1,000 more expensive, but again, you get better fuel economy, you know, like 5 mpg better, so that'll pay for itself, that extra $1,000, and all the nice other improvements of that CR-V. And I believe even for a top version of the CR-V, you still come in basically a little under this as well. So when you're talking about top trims, there's no upcharge for the CR-V, and to me it is still, I think, my favorite in this segment. But you know, as far as values go, it's not the cheapest. And then the last one that I guess this does seem a little bit better than is the Ford Escape hybrid. That, again, not great with the brake blending, so I didn't love the powertrain in that. It is a little more punchy, but again, just not as smooth as far as you're driving around town with. And, you know, those also are about $1,000 more expensive. You do have slightly better fuel economy. That is a nice perk, but you've lost all HVAC controls in the new Escapes. I mean, the Escape is still fine, and again, if the deal is right, because Escapes aren't hot sellers compared to many of the others, so if you can get a really big discount on an Escape, that could certainly make sense as well. Just know that, again, MSRP, you know, there's really not much of a value to be had there as far as that goes. And it is getting a little old in tooth at this point compared to, you know, the fresher Forester here as well. So just another thing to take into account. But so yeah, that's really all the competitors. And like I said, unfortunately, this just doesn't rank at the top. This honestly ranks towards the bottom of the pack in basically every way, whether we're talking about fuel economy, we're talking about power, we're talking about interior technology. You know, again, I think the refinement is very good. I think that, you know, mechanically it's solid, and it's just that it's not doing the best on paper, whether we're talking the sticker price or those specs. And so that's really where we end up here with the Forester. I'm happy we offer it, and if you are someone who's a Subaru diehard who's not cross-shopping and you love your Subarus, you love your Forester, you know, it's great that we finally do have a better fuel-efficient option here to give you a green Forester option. But it's just still, I think, it could be a little bit better as far as the pricing and, you know, the way everything else is in here. But a lot of this is just, again, Subaru being behind with infotainment stuff. Hopefully, again, these things will be fixed in the future. But for now, a great first effort here for the Forester Hybrid, and hopefully it gets better over time. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the 2025 Forester Hybrid. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Subaru for providing me here with this vehicle to review for you guys today. And yeah, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.